Hello, good morning. My name is Alice. I'm really pleased to be here. Thank you so much, Juliet, for having me. So I'm a cellist, a vocalist and a composer. And in my current work, I am trying to be hopeful. So this talk, which I have to say I've rewritten, I think, more times than I've rewritten anything ever, is my attempt to share what I've been learning about ritual practices as a method of accessing the magic of hope. Hope is magic. It requires a belief in something that doesn't exist. And if you can learn to practice it well, then it can absolutely transform or transfigure reality. So I'm sort of an accidental student of hope. Just like many of us here, probably, I've had quite a few moments of crisis in my life as an artist. I had a really big one about 6 years ago. And since then, in order to regroup and rebuild, I've been developing what I now realise are ritual practices which, when done successfully, can actually let me access that magic of hope. The first ritual I'll talk about, it began in a totally mundane way. I started running to improve my health. My runs would start out the same way every time. Down the road, through the little park, across the railway line, past the pylons, into the marshes. And I'd be running past these same electricity pylons every day. And without thinking much about it, I began to take a picture of them every time I passed. And I started to be really puzzled by how different they looked every time I saw them. You know, they should have been the same, like rigid, unchanging, but they were entirely different from one day to the next. And you know, like there's external elements like the cast of the light or the nature of the vegetation or the depth of the clouds, but how they showed themselves to me every time, just completely different and didn't seem to correlate to anything in the physical environment. It was like they were in a totally different universe every time. And I became more and more fixated on this to the point where I was running further and further up and down the pylon chain, visiting the substations at either end. And then still my main focus was my two pylons at the entrance to the marshes. And it really seemed like they were trying to tell me something. And with repetition and ritual care, I kind of consecrated the ground that they stood on, and I elevated them to become objects of ritual worship. And over time, during my moments there, I managed to achieve this, like, not awareness, but like a sort of non-particularized focus. And that was what let me tune in to hear what they were saying. And I'd love to tell you what they were saying, but it's really hard to put into words. Like, any word is just an abstraction from what they were trying to tell me. It was to do with change and degrees of permanence, and they were asking me, is it us that changes or is it you? And they were challenging me. They were saying, yes, we are constant and unchanging, but yes, permanence is a paradox, and it comes in shades, and the world we're living in, after the breath you just took, is never going to be the same as the world we would have been living in if you hadn't taken it. And where that thought would have once paralysed me, that, you know, being alive is like a state of perpetual change and loss, with the help of the pylons, I was beginning to see these degrees of permanence, and I started to feel... Okay, I'm going to move on to the next ritual. So at the same time I started running, I was also developing new behaviours around my cello playing due to some pain that I'd been experiencing that forced me to stop playing. When I was well enough to try playing again, I had to take it really slowly, think like just sitting in a chair first of all, not even thinking about playing or holding a cello, just sitting in a chair and thinking about the million little connections in my body and letting them all flow and release into each other, and like not holding myself up, but releasing myself upwards. After a certain point, though, the pain would always come back, however slowly I took things. It was like, as soon as I wanted to make a sound, or felt like I should make a sound, then parts of my body would get stuck, they'd start to resist, and the pain would be there. So I started trying new tactics, and they were like tactics of distraction. So I thought, if I can recontextualize the act of making a sound, then maybe I can like exercise or bypass the pain. I put a poem on my music stand, and I'd read it while I was playing open strings. I would light a candle, and I'd meditate, just only looking at the flame. I would make vocal sounds that were just completely disconnected from the sounds I was making on the cello, and just let them concrete themselves however they wanted, not trying to control them or anything like that. But actually, the majority of sounds that I made, I didn't record. It was a ritual process of catching myself, holding on, and letting go, and then getting stuck again, and letting go, and holding and releasing, and eventually managing to do two things at the same time. And when I achieved that simultaneity, like a light would come down onto me, and I would be squeezed by a giant hand, and it would squeeze like emotions out of me, or into me, I don't know, and I would often cry, and I'd be playing, and crying and making sound. Sometimes I'd use tape to record the layers of the sounds, and I would just try to let them be whatever they wanted, just. But actually, the majority of the sounds that I made, I didn't record, and that was probably more important, maybe that was the crux of the ritual, letting a sound exist and then just cease to exist, knowing it doesn't need to be anything. Continually putting the effort, my blood and my sweat and my rapidly dying body cells, putting them into making this sound, and then in the very same instant just accepting that the sound that I made is impermanent. Everything I make is impermanent, but I make it anyway, because of the hope. Or, making it anyway is the hope. I wrote a piece last year based on a 14th century piece of French polyphony by Jacob de Senlech, and it's all about hope, and it's called En attendant espérance. I'm going to play a bit of it for you in a moment. But during the writing was when I started really thinking about hope, and that's when I realised all my rituals, my candle meditations, the drones, pylons, chanting, crying, sighing, these are all my attempts to find a reliable method of accessing and performing the magic of hope. As a performer, I always felt my purpose is to communicate something that's inside me, or something that I find in the music, communicate it and get you to understand it, to feel it with me. And I would try really hard. And then as a composer, my job is not just how to make you feel a thing, but I also have to decide what I want you to feel. So So I've become a bit obsessed with this idea of being able to conjure up hopefulness somehow through music. Like, if we come together in a space and I create music with such beauty and clarity of intention, will it let you understand and share and thus augment my hope? Like, if we all hope together, does it make our hopes more likely to become real? Probably not. Just like I can't ever make you feel what I'm feeling, I can't make my hopes become yours just with a piece of music. Right? Even if I write a melody that's so beautiful and compelling, even if I learn to control my gesture and tone completely, and even if I give my melody like context, harmony, form, still just a piece of music. So I go back to my rituals. They're the only thing I've found that reliably help me to enter the magic state, the state of hope. So it makes sense that that's how I have to do it for you too. But now I still have a problem because my rituals don't mean anything to you. You know, you haven't probably been developing the language of candle meditation, or like you didn't hear what the electricity pylons were saying to me. You can't feel the feeling in my body when I connect guts and vocal cord and horsehair and tungsten and spine and feet and breath and in a gesture that gets strengthened and deepened hundreds of times a day for years and years, decades. I can't give that to you in like one 20-minute piece. But we're doing something, aren't we? Like, I'm here, and you're here, and I'm trying to do something. I'm putting something into your ears, and just like I said earlier, like, you're not going to be the same afterwards. Even if just for the fact that time is passing while you're hearing these sounds, you're going to be a different person than if time was passing when you weren't hearing the sounds. So I do start to think maybe it doesn't matter what the sound is. Maybe it doesn't matter what the hope is. I can't try to make you feel anything. You know, I've learned in lots of difficult ways that I can't make myself feel anything. But maybe the important thing is that I've come here this morning, and so have you, thank you. done something and you've listened, like, really thank you. You're here and I'm here. And that means something. And maybe that in itself gives us something to take away. And like, even if you don't want to take it, that's fine, but I'm still giving you something. Maybe the feeling of being given something or being invited somewhere. Maybe that's what stays with you. The act of starting something with care, carrying it on with care, and then crucially ending it with care. Maybe that's what makes the magic. If we all show each other that we've cared, even for a little bit, like maybe there is a little bit of hope in that. So I'm going to stop talking. But if you will, just listen with me, and all we have to do is just be here until the end. Thank you.